live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton, Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, September 12th, 2019. Is everyone in their September 12th mindsets now, or are you all stuck in your September 10th mindsets? That's the way we divide things in this country. Wake up! There's something terrible out there, and you need to fight it with vague platitudes. So, if you're ready, great, you can lead the way. If not, stay tuned. We'll round up the news and try and help you figure out how to attack the day. Good morning, everybody. It's the Kagro in the Morning Show. Daily Co's Radio is live now, and Bill tells us he's got no idea what I have in store for you today. He says his deep state memo is late arriving in the secret vacuum tube behind the Monet, and I suggest we all just tune in and listen, and there's really no better way to figure out what's on the agenda for the day than, well, really, honestly, if you're asking somebody else and see if they can whisper it to me so I can tell you on the air. It's going to be a day. There are plenty to talk about, of course, plenty to catch up on. We haven't been able to cram everything in days, and things spinning quickly out of control. But many stories we can pick up on. Greg Dworkin will come back. He gets a second shot at trying to summarize things today that he didn't get to yesterday. We'll see whether there's anything following on from yesterday or new details that we can use to clear things up, or whether we need to get to new garbage fires that are circulating today. I don't know what I say is the prevalent Twitter story these days. I don't know. Nothing jumping out at me. Yesterday was full of weird moments for Donald Trump and for those around Donald Trump. I guess the thematic moments from yesterday from Trump world were his weird comments about vaping. I guess it has reached it's gained the attention of the president that a couple of people have become ill and gotten sick from, they think, from vaping. It makes a certain amount of sense. Quite honestly, I was never entirely sure why that would be considered a safe thing to do. But I guess it was natural to think it was better steam than smoke. I don't know. I guess that was the idea. Anyway, so there is a developing issue, and you know how we are in this country with certain things. If a very relatively small number of people become ill or die for whatever reason, I don't know. I guess it has to do with is there something weird happening that we can hang blame on, I guess, and or things that adult leaders in the country don't do, but the kids do. So whether it's video games or dirty lyrics or vape pens or what have you, I guess they all sort of catch the blame for these things. And of course, everybody in the world has made the comparison to guns and said, why do we ignore? It's everything but the guns when thousands of people are being killed. But when it's vaping and 6 people, it's serious. You don't want kids dying of anything that they're inhaling if you can do something about it. Anyway, the president got wind of it. And in trying to explain, I guess, how he got wind of it, he came across as a, bizarre, detached weirdo, as he usually is. He's basically describing, I guess Melania had decided that this was something she was interested in and wanted to be involved in. I'm not even sure whether she really did or whether he told her this was something he wanted her to discover she wanted to be involved in. Anyway, trying to explain how the First Lady's interest in the vaping issue was raised, he says, well, you see, she has a son. And then he realizes, I guess, mid-sentence, well, he's my son. That's the son she has. Baron, we have a son together. And so he sort of jumbles it up. So she has a son together. That was his way of saying, we have a son together. And she's very concerned as a mother, etc. And that's why she's worried about it. But, it was already weird out there, and already people are like, it's odd that we don't see you, for instance, spending time with Barron very often. You don't see him with his kids a whole lot, but there's far more pictures, I think, in circulation of him hanging out these days anyway with his other adult kids, because one of them works in the White House, of course. And, not much in the way of photos with Barron, but I could understand that. He's younger, trying to keep him out of the public eye. I can't tell you why they don't do it, but it is kind of odd that they don't seem to spend a whole lot of time together. And then for him to describe, well, she has a son. I mean, I was there too, but it's hers, and that's her job, and blah, blah. Anyway, so it was very revealing in that one moment. The rest of the comments about vaping were equally detached and weird, as he insisted, innocent children are coming home and they're saying, Mom, I want to vape. And this is a problem. And this is not happening, of course. Oh, we got everything ringing today. Let's, hey, come on, answer it. I pushed the green button. You're just supposed to do what I tell you. All right. So I don't really think
don't
that's
the red button. Oh, my.
Yeah. Oh. Just kidding, everybody.
Bye,
all right.
Moscow.
Yeah. There's that great scene in War Games where they set the people up who were taking a tour somehow of NORAD command headquarters. I didn't realize that was something you could tour. And, there's a great scene with the don't press that button. Oh, my God. No, but it just brings up that welcome visitors message. I don't know if you remember that. It's a very dumb scene in a relatively dumb movie, but I like it anyway. Anyhow, all the bells and whistles were going off because all the volume was turned up everywhere. So lots of echo in my headphones. Anyway, good morning, Greg. Don't vape. Just stop.
It's a bad idea.
Put the vaping pen down, you crazy teenager. And, I don't know. So I was just commenting on, I think that was the weird moment of the day that people were chatting about idly on Twitter that I thought I would relay. But, he seems to have gotten in his head that, the way things are out there for kids today. Well, opioids, and then if they're not doing that, they're vaping, and it's very dangerous. And then maybe MS-13 would be number 3 on the list.
Yeah,
So-
well, we all know vaping is being brought up from Mexico, and if you build a wall, you
Yes.
can stop the vapors from coming over.
Yes,
So,
nothing
so
more
the
for
thing
Iran's
is, you have
vapor
this
than
device
walls.
which is relatively new,
Yeah.
and has just been in the past few years introduced into the country, and it turns out that the manufacturers, particularly Juul, Juul, the large manufacturer for vaping products, was aiming advertising at kids. There was one study from the public health area that showed that 80% of high school kids or middle school kids had heard about this. And so what the government is trying to do, led by the FDA, not led by Trump, is trying to intervene before it becomes so embedded in American culture that you can't get rid of it. And if you want to think about it in terms of a gun analogy, that's one way to think about it. If you want to stop the spread of AR-15s, the time to do it isn't after there's millions of them out there in households already.
Well, that's true.
So you're starting early.
Mom.
And the promise of vaping was that it's a nicotine substitute, like nicotine patches or nicotine gum, that could wean folks who already smoke cigarettes, which are known to be harmful and have 7,000 chemicals in them. I mean, literally 7,000 chemicals in them.
I have that many in my cupboard, yes.
And so, the idea would be to promote them to adults as a smoke cessation. But of course, that's not what happened. They're actually products that contain various and sundry levels of nicotine. And the early versions of it had not that much in it, but when Juul came on the market, they did two things which were particularly bad. They upped the amount of nicotine in it by like times 5.
Oh.
And at the same time, they started marketing flavors, which is a real great way to get
delicious.
kids, used to it, if not addicted to it, because nicotine is an addictive substance. So the push started with the FDA to try to regulate some of that, and because the feds have been relatively slow about it, states like Michigan have taken the initiative of trying to ban flavored vaping substances
Okay.
so that kids don't get a hold of it.
How's that going?
And then as all of that was developing in a slow background, public health, you don't hear that much about it kind of thing, it turned out that, kids figured out, you know what? You could put stuff in the vaping device and inhale it, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the stuff that you buy in the store. So you can get various and sundry illegal THC products, for example, and put that into the vaping device.
Mulch from the playground, for instance.
What was the old stuff that used to be on marijuana, paraquat? You know, the
herbicide.
Herbicides and stuff like that. So anyway,
good idea.
that starts to happen, and then mysteriously, a relatively new pulmonary problem is identified. Young vapors are starting to show up in hospitals with pneumonia or some sort of other lung-related issues. And this gets reported in the medical journals only last month. And then it turns out that as the word spreads through the medical community, more and more kids are winding up, meaning teenagers and young adults, are winding up in ICUs and hospitals, and some of them start to die.
Yes.
So, again, because it's early in the whole story of vaping, the FDA and the government decides that, they need to do something about it. And, of course, this is something that is very concerning to moms,
right?
So it becomes a bit of a political issue in a election year. But it's mostly driven not by Trump and not by politics, but by the FDA and the CDC noting that there is this new issue, and if you want to do something about it, maybe it's better to do it in the beginning before we have a problem. We blew it with the opioid crisis. We blew it with the gun issue. How about we take the initiative on this one and try to do something early? So that's the background behind why all of a sudden it's an issue now.
Yeah, it's just in his own way, Trump has turned it into a weird old man thing. Like,
I
want to vape.
To put it in the most simple case, he doesn't understand a word of it.
Yeah.
Somebody handed him something to read, and he read it.
It may have been Melania. It may not have been. I don't know. But yeah, that, and then she has a son. I don't know how she got him.
But yeah, she has this. I mean, so he's weird.
Yeah.
And the way he handles it is weird. But essentially, that's what happens. He doesn't understand a single word of it, and so it's somebody else's issue. It doesn't affect me. I don't smoke. I don't understand why you want me to do something about it. This is an issue that doesn't affect me. So, okay, fine. I will read, whatever piece of paper you give me, and let's just move on and get to something that's about me.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't understand it, and really nobody. None of his Republican allies really understand either. This is weird to them to be called upon to intervene in a market as Republicans, but all their rules are out the window, so I think they'll be okay with that. But so this will be a new thing, and I wonder whether they hope to mine it to bring concerned suburban moms back into the fold, or whether it's just a one-off thing. I guess
probably somebody told him that, so that, look, go ahead and read it. This is where you benefit. Other than that, just go ahead and read it.
That could be it, right? Yeah, I hate reading. Why am I doing this? It's good for suburban moms. All right. I like them. They're hot. Okay.
So,
whatever, sir.
Just Juul threw millions of dollars at Washington and hasn't bought much. Trump just delivered a big blow to the dominant vaping company. Let me just give you this piece from Politico. So.
I mean, he could get a call from a lobbyist that he likes a lot, and that could be it.
Yeah, you never know. You absolutely never know. So that's that. So other stuff's happening too, besides that particular one. But I just thought that was worthwhile talking about a little bit.
All right.
We have the issue of John Bolton, the professor from Felix the Cat, having been either fired or resigned or quit. Or I guess he was quired because, he says he quit and Trump says he was fired and who knows the truth of it.
I see.
But he's got a big mouth, and so the speculation is that he's going to keep talking after he leaves. unlike some of the other people who don't, but probably not that much, because don't forget there's the whole entire right-wing grift industry. And if Bolton opens his mouth too much, then he doesn't get, the paying job that you're supposed to get after you do this or before you do this or while you do this or however that works.
Selling beet extract pills.
Well, that's what he'll be doing if he strays the line.
Oh, I thought that's
so.
I thought that was the job.
Otherwise, you can go back to American Enterprise Institute, like Scott Gottlieb did after he left the FDA. But there's always a treadmill there of places you can work, but not if you open your mouth and you don't become a good person. Didn't they fire David Frum or something for speaking out? I mean, these things happen. So
I don't know. He doesn't tell me. But, and I thought that was, I got confused. I guess they have a lot of big mouths who end up hawking the vitamins, and I thought that was the reward, but maybe not.
That's where you go when you can't do anything else. You got to make a living,
Somebody has to.
I was an expert in international relations and knew every foreign leader, and now I'm hawking survival kits in gold.
Yeah, all right. So I guess that's the backup
show,
plan.
Because that's all I got now.
Yeah. It just happens.
And I do commercials for pain creams with Chuck Woolery.
Yes. All right. Well, the point is he'll land on
or maybe I can just be the opening act for Dennis Miller. I don't know. I mean, there's not that much you can go if you get out of line there. So you got to do this thing.
All right. Well, we'll see. How well he used that, or whether he thinks he can strike out on his own, and that he's got a brand that he can bring to America.
Right. Meanwhile, Mike Pompeo was being touted. We talked about this on the show the other day. Mike Pompeo was being touted as maybe what he'll do is a Henry Kissinger, and he'll be the national security advisor and the Secretary of State.
Yes, right.
And there was a comment this morning from the White House sources saying, no, that's not what's going to happen, which makes me think, of course, that's what's going to happen.
Yes, that's the way I would treat that one.
Right? I mean, I'm learning from you. So let's see. It's reported. White House official tells CBS News that Secretary Pompeo, as head of the State Department and NSC, absorbing the role as a national security advisor, was discussed but shot down. This is not under consideration, the official said. So I figured Trump will announce it on Twitter any day now, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the usual follow-up to this sort of thing, and insisting we're not considering it, and then,
and then considering it.
Yeah. What sometimes worries me is that they might not have had the idea in mind, and someone says they'll probably do this. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't monitor Fox and Friends that closely, so I don't really know what the status is there.
We'll have to ask Media Matters what's going to happen.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about North Carolina 9, because now we have a little bit more information.
Cheaters.
And we also have the reaction of people. This is a typical one. This is Paul Kane writing in the Washington Post. House GOP suburban slide, a worrisome trend for party despite narrow North Carolina win. They do not want socialism, says Liz Cheney, number 3 member of GOP leadership.
Yes.
They do not want to see their private health insurance taken away. They don't want to see illegal immigrants given free health care. They do not want to see the economy destroyed by the Green New Deal. Having your private health insurance taken away is unpopular. She's right about that. And they don't want to see illegal immigrants given free health care. That may be semi-popular. They don't want to see the economy destroyed by the Green New Deal. Well, not wanting the economy destroyed is popular, but as it turns out, the Green New Deal is also popular.
Oh.
So Kane writes, that's a risky bet for a party that continues to hemorrhage support in suburbs that serve as political cornerstones in swing states such as North Carolina, where Charlotte's suburban voters on Tuesday continued to break against Republicans. Voters in Mecklenburg County, a suburban stronghold, gave Democrat Dan McCready a margin of 12 points over Republican Dan Bishop, bigger than the 9-point advantage McCready posted there during last year's invalidated race. Bishop won the race based on running up the count in the more exurban and rural portions of the district in the south central part of the state, continuing the geographical divide in the era of President Trump. That provided a sigh of relief for Republicans worried that defeat would have prompted even more retirement announcements. I don't know that this is going to change that one way or the other, but the point is that McCready did better in the suburbs and worse in the rural areas. And the question on the table is this a sign of things to come? Or was there something special about North Carolina 9? And it turns out that NCO 9 might have had some special things. Dave Wasserman repeating the same theme here. If Democrats want to understand how they lost to Trump despite gaining tons of ground in places like Charlotte and the Triangle, they need to visit Robeson County, North Carolina. It's Robeson, not Robeson.
Is it? Okay. Robitussin.
Final Robeson County results. McCready won it by 1.1% tonight, despite winning it by 15.3% last fall. Okay, that's an awful performance that helped cost the Democrats this special. But J. Miles Coleman, who follows politics fairly closely, and if I'm recalling correctly, he actually works over at Decision Desk, which is one of the conservative-leaning places that tends to follow elections and often has their people on the ground analyzing and predicting, well, this is this many votes to come in, and this is how it's going to go later tonight, and we're some of the people who call races and so on and so forth. So J. Miles Coleman, we have a very amicable relationship with them. A key ingredient to Dan Bishop's North Carolina win was Robeson County in the eastern part of the district. This was an Obama to Trump county, already making it interesting that McCready won by 15% in 2018. It nearly flipped tonight with the Lumbee Indian precincts in the west moving most heavily GOP. Really? And before we get into that, basically, Robeson is divided into thirds, a third white, a third rural black, not the same thing as urban black, and Lumbee Indian.
Rural, yeah.
Okay. And it turned out that Dan Bishop did the politics thing, and I'm going to give you a link to the actual bill, a short summary there.
Okay.
But there was this bill that he sponsored.
Only a bill.
An act to amend the state recognition of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina to make changes regarding the conveyance of the Lumbee Tribe Cultural Center and to establish the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina Trust Fund. In other words, more recognition for the tribe and more money for them, sponsored by Dan Bishop and a couple of other people, including at least one Democrat. But he had a bill specifically aimed at their needs. And guess what? He did really well in that area compared to the last guy that ran, Mark Harris.
That's pretty amazing.
So is that a harbinger of everything to come and therefore a microcosm of the country writ large? Maybe not. Maybe there are some special local issues, all politics is local, that have to do with what happened there. Also, there was a really, 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 really big push for Indian country voter registration drives. Nice article about that here that I'll also send you. And I'm just saying that when you look at those particular rural areas and try to see where was the Republican appeal, it was a combination of sponsoring bills that favor them coupled with a strong nonpartisan drive to get everybody registered and voting, which was relatively new compared to last year and the years before.
Yeah, that's not their usual strategy at all.
So when you put those two things together, it turned out he got a lot of votes there.
How interesting. I did see somebody make the call ahead of the election saying that the Lumbee Indians would be key to deciding the race, but I thought that was being put forward.
And it was, and they did, and it was kind of interesting.
I thought it was being put forward to argue that that McCready had a much better chance because of the numbers of Lumbee Indians who were registered and ready to vote. But as it turns out,
and you think that, and one of the other arguments there is that whereas Trump had his rallies and a clear support Trump message, McCready's case that he was making is essentially party over country. And local North Carolinians who were writing into Daily Kos this morning, I did the pundit roundup this morning and say, I was here, I heard the message, I didn't totally understand the message. What was he saying? What's in it for me?
I don't know.
It's kind of mushy. So you had anti-Trump stuff pushing the suburbs, but when you're trying to reach rural areas, which are different, you really need to have more of a targeted message. And did the Democrats do? Obviously, they didn't do enough, but could they have done more to help motivate their voters to come? That's the whole Rachel Bitecofer thing.
Yes.
Trump is going to motivate his voters. That's what Trump rallies do. The Trump rally may have motivated Charlotte voters and suburban voters to come out and vote Democrat. But what did you do for the rural areas to motivate them? Anti-Trump, remember, this is a Obama to Trump county. And Trump is still very popular there. So anti-Trump isn't going to have the automatic same message without doing anything else there than it would in other places.
Yes.
So you can't take anything for granted, and you can't just say, okay, well, Trump will be on the ballot, that's enough. You really have to target the folks that you are trying to get out to vote. If you're going to do turnout and not persuasion, and you think turnout is the bigger thing, then you got to do more to turn your people out.
Yeah.
Or
what would do that?
Or you're going to lose.
Well, apparently, yeah, he did. So, yeah, there's I saw some side by sides of some of the, I guess, the mailing pieces that went out, and I saw Rachel Bidikofer, among others, criticizing, I think rightly, I mean, certainly from my perspective, which is to say, not in North Carolina, a wishy-washy sort of approach for McCready, generally advertising that he would work with both parties. That
yeah, exactly. Now, maybe that's what you have to do, and it's an R+12 district, but
yeah.
It's not enough to motivate your people to do that.
No,
and I got after the break, because the break's coming up, but after that, I got a really nice piece by Dan Anconia explaining that a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah, I did. I saw that one, and I saw her reaction to it. I still have some, well, we'll come back to it after the break. Like I said, there's some areas of disagreement, I think, in defining our terms more than anything else.
Yeah,
I think we
and
all
it's
agree.
definitely worth having a debate about.
Okay. Well, then we'll do it in about 2.5 minutes. We still have to kill some time here before the music tells us it's time to leave. But it was, makes for an interesting thing. Okay, good. So we can dance for a few minutes and then come back, and we'll pick up where we left off. And I'll go out and start vaping if I can in between now and then. But I think you can do it quickly and easily. I'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Vaping. I wonder why everybody thought that it would be safe to just inhale some other hot gas. I don't know.
I can't answer that, but it's not that it was safe. It's that it hasn't been proved to be harmful.
Right. Yeah, that's another thing. Sort of. I don't know how long you can.
Well,
you know what? Test these things. Now you got a problem. But I don't know. I guess anybody who was selling you before, well, I think you should inhale this hot gas. Oh wow, it's killing thousands of people. Wait, I changed my mind. This hot gas. Oh, well, all right. Now, I know they're looking out for my health there at Philip Morris, so, okay, I don't know. I found that a little odd, but maybe just people like grape-flavored stuff, and that's all there is to it. All right, no more on vaping. We were talking about North Carolina 09, which also should not be directly inhaled.
Do not inhale North Carolina 09. So Chris Arnott, who, as you know, goes to West Virginia McDonald's, it's unfair to characterize him as always going to diners. In fact, he likes to hang out at the McDonald's because that's often the only thing that's open in some of these small towns.
Newt Gingrich used to say, great coffee, great fries.
And he's got some lovely pictures and scenes from Robinson, because that's one of the places that he went to. And so he says it's one of the most fascinating places he's been to in the U.S. It's 1/3 white, 1/3 black, 1/3 Native American, which is the Lumbee tribe, all mostly poor. And he's got pictures of it there. And again, this is a county that has voted for Trump. So Dan Anconia is talking about Dan Ancona, Ancona,
Yeah, okay.
is talking about some of these messaging issues. And he says, in the summer of 2016, a friend of mine who works for a big advertising firm and is a 9/11 survivor, so maybe this is a good day for this because he did it yesterday, asked me why the Democrats' ads suck so much.
That is
And I
interesting.
said, good question. What I found pretty quickly was that the problem was not that Democrats weren't using enough AI or psychographics or advanced stuff. These tactics help on the margins, and campaigns should absolutely be looking into them. But their absence wasn't the big problem.
Okay.
He's, by the way, a digital and narrative strategist. That's what he does for a living.
Digital narrative strategist?
Digital and narrative strategist.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Sure, why not?
He says the much bigger problem was the strong, overwhelming tendency to avoid making an effective argument.
Oh, well.
Basic blocking and tackling stuff in terms of marketing. Define and position your product or worldview and explain the benefits in a clear, emotionally compelling way. The GOP doesn't have this problem. Brad Parscale might be a dick in the sense of having no compunction about weaponizing the great diversity of Americans to pit us against each other, and he's not a genius, but he ran circles around Hillary's team on these fundamentals. Since he was new, he had zero attachment to how it's always been done. He didn't even know how it's always been done. Wasn't Parscale's work, but another example, their closing ad was racially divisive and anti-Semitic and a powerful argument. So that was fundamentals. And fast forward to North Carolina 9. McCready for North Carolina seems like a genuinely nice, intelligent guy and somebody who would be an excellent representative. Part of the Republican message against him was, my opponent's allies are clowns. And there was actually a picture of the clowns, the squad and all the other people that he was standing next to. And his response, I'll work with the people calling my allies clowns. You see the problem there?
Yes.
So everybody's going to say, but he closed the gap in an R plus 12 district. Great, but we have to look at why the place is R12 to begin with. There's a lot of reasons, like straight up cheating, gerrymandering.
Yeah, those
but
are bad.
Voters in that district haven't heard an alternative argument. And today, $10 million later, they still haven't heard the argument. That's a lost opportunity. Next, everybody's going to say, well, he couldn't have run hard left. I'm not suggesting he needed to. There's a ton of maneuvering between AOC and Bernie on the one hand and indistinguishable from the GOP on the other. So put yourselves in the shoes of a rural or small-town North Carolina voter. Remember, lots of rural folks aren't white. We just talked about the fact that 2/3 in Robinson are not. Whose community has gotten the shaft from decades of crappy trade deals, big box stores, opioids, and disinvestment? Hey, maybe even vaping now. Maybe one of those kids wound up in the hospital.
Sure. I'm sure they're all vaping.
Which story is more appealing to you? Persuading the middle versus mobilizing the base is a false dichotomy. This is my favorite tweet in the whole thing. Good messages do both, and truly great messages demoralize the opponent's base at the same time.
Okay.
The beginning of this Chris Hayes podcast makes the argument as well as I've seen it made, and talking about with Stacey Abrams, because she knows how to do that. And he says, probably enough ranting for now. We're still losing the imagination battle. Not the first time an institution failed a veteran who deserved better, and won't be the last. McCready's a veteran. I hope some learning comes out of it, and as always, much appreciation for McCready running, in his service. But basically, you have to say what's going on here. Republicans nearly stole this district. Don't reward them.
Yes.
Would be a better thing than I'll work with everybody.
Yes, that would be true. That wouldn't really necessarily be nationalizing the election, but actually, it's probably something we could probably take elsewhere. Republicans steal elections, don't reward them, but okay. Yeah.
I mean, look what else they're doing in North Carolina, right? With we're trying to block Medicaid expansion, rather, by, cheating on when they're taking votes. And in fact, even while 9/11 is happening, they go and they have a surprise vote in order to override a veto,
right? Yeah.
Because they're trying to have a budget that doesn't include Medicaid. I mean, there's a lot that the Republicans are doing that you can take back to this community and say, this is the Republican Party and this is what I'm running against. He didn't do that.
Yes. He in that one of the tweets in this tweet storm shows these two, I guess they're videos side by side, video screen caps. And so the Dan Bishop one is, Dan McCready is going to go to Congress and be friends with AOC and Ilhan Omar and Nancy Pelosi, and they're clowns, and you hate them, so don't vote for him. And Dan McCready does the pleasant stroll down the street with two elderly people dressed in blue blazer and khaki pants, saying he'll work with both parties. Which, I mean, that's very interesting on two levels. The first of which is, wow, that's boring. That tells me nothing. I mean, I'm going to throw
exactly.
that in
and
the garbage.
That's what the North Carolinians who are writing in were saying. As I saw the message, I don't know what he was saying.
Yeah,
and that's the same thing that this guy is saying. You got to be specific about what it is you're trying to say, and you really need to run against the Republican Party.
In addition,
not just say I'm such a nice guy, I'll work with anybody.
Yeah,
that doesn't motivate your base to come out.
It may demotivate
whereas their
them.
base is going to be motivated to come out for other reasons.
Yes. Dan points out that this is actually demotivational. You mean Dan McCready is going to work with both parties even though they said he's an idiot and he's a clown and the whole party is a clown?
Or even worse, I'm really mad at Republicans for X, Y, and Z, and now this guy is coming in and saying he's going to start to work with the people that I'm really mad at. What?
Yeah, well, that's true, and it is
do it
pretty
different.
sad.
You have to do it different, and that's one of the reasons why some of the progressives are mad at Biden right now.
But that is the national Democratic, Washington, D.C. Democratic leadership hopes against hope that everyone will run by saying, why, I'm so reasonable, I'll work with both parties. I don't know why they want people to do that, but they do. And not everyone will do that. And, they don't have the wherewithal to force everyone to do that. But that's certainly what they are advising people. And I think they're advising them, pointing to it and saying, this is so effective that you won't win, but you'll be very close.
And tear your hair about all the times this has happened.
Yeah.
And the basic message here is what you need to do is you need to engage your base so that you can convince the middle.
Or overwhelm
okay.
it, I guess.
And a perfect example of where we didn't do it and should have is with the Affordable Care Act. Because when it came out, Democrats were on defense and they didn't want to talk about it. And this, instead of making the case of what it's going to do for you.
Yeah.
And so it's, what's in the Green New Deal that's good for you? We have a climate change issue. The young people are really motivated about this. Explain the good parts. Explain the good parts of Medicare for all, even though there are bad parts. But engage your base, have that discussion, and then that's how you get the middle to come around to, okay, there's some good ideas in here I think we can work with. It's not all bad. And when you don't do that and you just play defense and say, I don't want to talk about that, I want to talk about this other thing that I know is popular, you lose your opportunity and you lose your motivation. So, there are other aspects of Joe Biden's strength that we've talked about on the show that are completely underappreciated and why he's remaining at the top, although that doesn't mean that he's going to stay there in the future, but why up until now he's been able to maintain his position at the top. But one of the things that goes against him is that if he is the candidate, then his vice president's going to need to be somebody like Stacey Abrams or Kamala Harris or somebody or Warren or somebody who can make the case as to why Democrat ideas are better, more interesting, and not just, they're going to, be death panels.
Okay.
Simple lying messages with emotional appeal can't be counteracted with a laundry list. They have to be counteracted with stories, with narrative. So you have to talk about the person who was helped by the Affordable Care Act, who otherwise wasn't helped before, the person with a pre-existing condition who can now get covered, the baby in the NICU who can get all of their care paid for now, that kind of thing, rather than, all right, here's a list of why this particular tax credit is really going to be good in terms of investment. No, I don't care about that. Tell me about a person. Tell me about that. They're talking about death panels. We're talking about empowering seniors. You have to do it in a way that engages your base, but also persuades the middle. McCready did not do that, and he lost. And so there should be a message there and a lesson there, even though it wasn't oh my gosh, he's supposed to win, but now he lost. He was supposed to lose, and he actually made it close. But he could have done better. We want to do better. And, basically we would love to win everywhere, although that's not realistic. So you want to do your best. If you do your best and lose, that's different than, okay, you could have and should have done this and you didn't.
Well, all I can tell you is Abigail Spanberger, therefore something.
So is she popular in her district?
Is she popular in his district? I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't been there. She's the representative of her district. I have that.
If she's popular in her district and she wins her way, that's fine. It doesn't mean you have to do that everywhere.
Yes, it does. Or possibly.
But if, the big difference, of course, is that in 2020, Donald Trump will be on the ballot.
Yes. You will have him to run against.
And if that's the case, and Trump happens to be popular in North Carolina 9, then he may win North Carolina 9. You're still going to have to run up the numbers in the Charlotte suburbs because you get to add that to the rest of the state and see if you can carry the state.
Well, what does that? Working with both parties?
No.
Oh. Why didn't anyone tell him that?
Right. So, there's parts of the electorate that you're not going to be able to persuade, and there's parts of the electorate that you're not going to be able to bring out on your side. And again, the example I always think of is 2004 Ohio, where John Kerry had his targets and hit them, and W had his targets and hit them, but it turned out that W targets were higher, and it turned out he won Ohio and the election. And so you have to appreciate the fact that the other side is going to turn out. But, there's been some interesting political science papers suggesting that Trump rallies actually are a net detriment, not a net benefit. That overall, what happens is that when Trump shows up in a place, that, he really motivates the other side at least as much as he motivates his side. That didn't appear to be the case here. So I'm not afraid of Trump rallies when we're looking at national elections, but they can work locally.
Okay.
If you don't do anything to counter them. And that I think Bittercopper's right. Now, the way that she suggests doing it, make it all about Trump, that may not work in a Trump plus 12 district.
You would think that would encounter some problems,
Yeah. But anyway, there it is. I just thought all of that was interesting and gives a little bit more nuance to the idea that we lost North Carolina.
Uh-oh. Well, she's got an idea about how to win. That's good news. I think it is about that time for your visitor to show up today. So, for some reason, at 9:45 is the most popular time to ring the doorbell at the Dworkin house. I have no idea why that is the case. All right. Well, while we wait for him to come back, I guess we can move on from North Carolina 09. It is very difficult to tell exactly. I did feel like I was talking past people in analyzing these two ads that Dan Acona put side by side. It was difficult to know what everyone was talking about and what the terms meant, but it certainly seemed pretty wishy-washy. That's certainly the case, and the sort of thing that if it had arrived as a mailer at my house, I would have thrown. I know what I'm voting for. I know what I'm doing. But even as a Democrat, I would instantly throw this piece of mail in the trash. Work with both parties. I hope that's not actually true, but I recognize that he thinks he has to say that. But all right, and the public-facing message is sure we're reasonable technocrats. Which I'm sorry that's the case, but
thank you, Mike Dukakis. That worked really well.
Yeah. All right.
Let's look larger at the issue here. This is a lovely piece by Angie Maxwell in the Washington Post entitled "What We Get Wrong About the Southern Strategy."
The Southern Strategy.
It took much longer and went much further than we think.
All right.
And she writes, most Americans have heard of the story of the Southern Strategy. The Republican Party, in the wake of the Civil Rights Movement, decided to court Southern white voters by capitalizing on their racial fears. So Goldwater, Nixon. In reality, the South swung back and forth in presidential elections for 4 decades following '64. And Republicans didn't win the South solely by capitalizing on white racial angst. The decision was but one in a series of decisions the party made, not just on race, but on feminism and religion as well. And again, you have to figure in white evangelical voters when you're trying to figure out how immovable some of the voting populations you're trying to reach really are. You have to know that about your population. The GOP successfully fused ideas about the role of government in the economy, women's place in society, white evangelical Christianity, and white racial grievance in what became a long Southern strategy that extended well past the days of Goldwater and Nixon. Over 40 years, Republicans fine-tuned the pitch and won the allegiance of Southern whites by remaking their party in this image. Goldwater's campaign did launch it, and it was originally called Operation Dixie. Mm-hmm. But Nixon's team coded the appeals, the silent majority, for example, law and order.
Right.
And that was a dog whistle signaling support for an end to protests, marches, and boycotts, while the war on drugs played on racialized fears about crime. Nixon also adopted a stance of, quote, benign neglect, I had forgotten that one, on civil rights enforcement, a message that his advocates, such as Democrat-turned-Republican Strom Thurmond, bluntly conveyed to Southern whites on his behalf. As Thurmond puts it, if Nixon becomes president, there's a quote, he has promised he won't enforce either the Civil Rights or the Voting Rights Act. Stick with him.
Okay.
Right?
I mean,
and it temporarily worked, and then Carter came along and changed that. And, Bill Clinton also had inroads, and that's why for a while it was always the thing that if you want a Democrat to win the White House, you got to get a Southerner.
Oh yes, right. That was the talk. While a Southerner who benefited directly from it was the top Democrat. Yeah. Right.
The GOP also pounced on another emerging wedge issue, provoking anxiety among white Southerners. Both Republicans and Democrats had long supported the Equal Rights Amendment. The 1977 National Women's Conference in Houston, organized a push for ratification, featured Betty Ford and Rosalind Carter. But bipartisanship couldn't shield the ERA from a growing backlash on the right driven by Phyllis Schlafly's organization, Stop ERA, which stood for Stop Taking Our Privileges. Schlafly misleadingly and ominously insisted the ERA would force women to put their newborns in government-run daycare, serve on the front lines of combat, newborns, embrace lesbianism, and enter the workplace.
Oh, there's a lot on the shoulders of newborns.
Yeah, but, I mean, that would work these days, right? This portrayal resonated deeply with female voters trying to live up to the ideals of, quote, Southern white womanhood, end quote. And this construct, which had been manufactured in the antebellum era to justify the South's racial hierarchy, asserted that white women were delicate and fragile, Southern flowers, and needed constant protection from black males. Over time, it cast white supremacy as chivalry, while relegating Southern white women to a distant pedestal in the home where they could be taken care of by men. And according to Schlafly, the ERA would destroy Southern white women's way of life. And that resonated. I don't know why it resonated, but it did. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
That long Southern strategy had finally come to fruition. Add in Pat Robertson and the moral majority. And the GOP's partisan conversion of Southern white evangelicals is so complete that no longer must a Republican candidate hold authentic religious beliefs to secure their support. Nowhere is this clearer than in Southern white evangelical support for Donald Trump. Right. Only 38% of white evangelicals living in the South identified Trump as a Christian, but 84% of them still voted for him.
Yeah.
Right?
That's pretty amazing.
So, understanding the full range of the GOP efforts in the South since Nixon clears up any confusion as to how Trump, a man whose personal life seems to violate every moral precept avowed by most Southern white conservatives, secured their unyielding allegiance. Trump has wielded the GOP Southern playbook with precision, defending Confederate monuments, eulogizing Schlafly at her funeral, hiring Reagan's Southern campaign manager, Paul Manafort. Trump, in many ways, is no anomaly. He's the very culmination of the GOP's long Southern strategy. Now go apply that to North Carolina 9 and the rural areas.
All right, I'll be right back.
It's not the Deep South, but there's an appeal there. And part of it may run through the churches, and part of it may run through the anti-female strain. But Trump has strength in those areas. You've got to have some compelling message. And part of it may be attacking the parts of Trump that you can, not on cultural issues, but just on incompetence and lying, graft, that kind of thing. So if you're going to take Trump on, that's how you do it. The lack of such message means it must be okay because nobody's even saying anything about it. But that can't be your only issue. You also have to make it about the Republicans stealing elections and other things that might bother, local voters. But this is all in the context of that's why, it's an R+12 district to begin with.
Yes. Okay. Man. Well, that seems... It rings all the bells. I mean, it's certainly true that that's the case. I feel like it's something that's been argued before, or that maybe we've come at it at a different angle. And when we discuss things like, Trump is a symptom of a broader problem with the Republican Party, and
this is the problem right here. Yeah, right. You're absolutely right. And it is Republicans in general, and Trump just happens to be their champion that they're going to support because he fights for us. That's what they mean about fighting for us. Mm-hmm. So again, it's just difficult to look at North Carolina 9 in any other way as, we lost, but it's amazing that it was close, given that this is the background for all of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's true, and that's what makes the analysis so difficult. Even when the strategists who came up with the idea that you should run as a wishy-washy, both parties, either both sides or I'll work with both sides, come away with it. They say, well, we made it close. The stats say you should have lost by 12, but you only lost by 2. That means saying you'll work with both parties is the best.
Well, looking like a genius when you win and looking like a fool when you lose, when in fact you lost by 400 votes. I mean, you weren't a genius if you won that close one, and you weren't an idiot if you lost that close one.
Yeah. Well, it's going to take some persuading.
You could have won, and your strategy still might have been stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there is that. And that takes us to, or leads to a discussion, which I don't know that we'll necessarily have, of the raging battle happening inside D.C., wherein the Democratic Party institutions are working overtime to make sure that no new consulting ideas are born, so that everyone can continue to sell the, yes, you absolutely want to mail out this I'll work with both parties thing, because I already have it printed and I can put your name on it and it's easy and my margins are high, versus, well, some other people have some other ideas, and now we're like officially telling candidates that you're not allowed to hire these consultants anymore.
Well, two things I want to mention before I go. Nate Silver pointed out from the latest CNN poll, one thing I don't think people get is that a lot of Democrats are closer to Biden than Warren Sanders, quote, on the issues. Even among Democrats, slightly more voters are worried that the party will nominate somebody too liberal, that's 49%, than somebody who's not liberal enough, that's 41%. So I mentioned that. We've talked about this on the show. Half the party are moderate conservatives. The other half are progressives. And in terms of looking at Biden's continuing strength, part of it is the safe. Part of it is the I want restoration. Part of it is I just want to get rid of Trump. And it looks like, I don't care what you say, that he seems like the one that has the highest head-to-heads against, even though we know that that doesn't mean that much. But part of it is they like his agenda, and I would point to his healthcare agenda, supporting Affordable Care Act 2.0 over Medicare for all. That is a more popular position.
Yeah, and maybe that's what when I see very frequently people I know, and sometimes people I don't know, on Twitter saying, I don't get it with Biden. I don't know anybody that's supporting him, and then maybe that just because
that's
we know,
the Pauline Kael line from the Nixon
era,
right?
We
I don't know
people,
anybody who voted for Nixon.
We know people who discuss who they're supporting on Twitter, and other people who say, Twitter? I hate Twitter. I don't even know what that is. I'm busy vaping.
That's why I'm busy vaping. Yeah. I'm busy selling vaping equipment.
Or whatever it is.
That's
those guys,
why we look
must
at polls,
exist.
because polls give us a bigger, larger universe to look from.
They call more people than Twitter does, don't they?
Yeah. Anyway, the last thing, because I just don't want to forget to say it.
All right.
Is Josh Barrow tweets, I don't understand the point of withdrawing from the Iran deal and sanctioning Iran, but then giving Iran financial aid to offset the effects of the sanctions in order to induce them to stay in the deal. Trump is basically proposing that he give $1 trillion to them so they'll come back and do the same thing that Obama had without him interfering, screwing it up in the first place.
I think I missed this entire story. Is Josh's tweet in your roundup?
No, it's in the round. That's the last one.
Last one. Okay.
Anthony Zurcher says history
there
sometimes
it
repeats
is.
itself
Got
as
it.
tragedy and farce at the same time.
Yeah.
First time tragedy, second time is farce. Sometimes it's all in the same thing. So part of the deal with firing John Bolton,
Yeah.
which I started my segment with, is now you can look at Iran in a totally different way.
I guess so.
What are they doing? What have they done? Where's the sense in any of this? It's not there. You can run against Trump's incompetence.
I guess so. I'm baffled by this. It's a development I didn't even notice.
Well, I'm here to bring these.
Yes, right. Well, that's a good idea. I need to go and look up some news articles about this.
Well, the break is coming out, so I'll help you with that.
Okay, good. That gives me 1 minute to find
stuff.
out how we got to. I'm giving financial aid to Iran. How? What? Okay. Stop sleeping, everyone. This is getting in our way and our ability to figure out what's going on. Although here, I thought it was all about vaping, and it turns out to be financial aid for Iran.
Right, okay, this is from the Daily Beast. Trump flirts with $15 billion bailout for Iran, sources say. Trump says he hates the Obama-era deal, but he's toying with a French proposal to get the Iranians to comply with it by giving a $15 billion line of credit to Tehran.
You know what? All right. What do I do? Right? I mean, I hate Trump and I think he's an idiot, but I suppose, okay, if he trips and falls and hits his head on the right policy, do I say no?
No, you say yes.
I guess so.
And then you vote for somebody else.
I guess so. Yeah. Right. Oh, well, that's the ultimate thing. I go, okay, credit where credit is due. Here, credit. My vote's going over here, but credit. Yeah, and that's nothing he loves more than getting credit for things.
It's not true. I won't say anything good about Trump. Look, he's got a good vaping policy, and I like his new policy with Iran. Thank you very much. Vote for the Democrat.
Yeah, his hair is huge. That's wonderful, I guess. How's that? Would that work for you? All right, I'll take it, I guess. I mean, we'll see whether it materializes. Like everything else, it could just be garbage that he spews for no reason. All right. Well, thanks for spewing garbage for a reason, Greg. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We'll see you next week. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. I guess I better catch up on what's happening on the Iran front because I'm completely dumbfounded by the idea that this should even be out there. It's a wild reversal. I don't think that this means that he can't screw it up and make it bad policy sometime very soon. And like I said, it may only be another trial balloon that sinks very quickly, but let's take a look at this here. Daily Beast. Trump flirts with $15 billion bailout for Iran, sources say. Wow. Trump says he hates the Obama-era nuclear deal with Iran, but he's toying with a French proposal to get the Iranians to comply with it. A $15 billion line of credit to Tehran. Wow. Aaron Banco and Asawin Subasang, more practice at trying to say that name. It happens all the time here when we read the Daily Beast. Let's see what's up here. President Donald Trump has left the impression with foreign officials, could be an error, members of his administration and others involved in Iranian negotiations, that he is actively considering a French plan to extend a $15 billion credit line to the Iranians if Tehran comes back into compliance with the Obama-era nuclear deal. Now, ordinarily we would say this makes no sense. Josh Barrow says it makes no sense. And that's not our chief indicator of whether or not it makes any sense. It's just, okay, a person has said that, and it's probably true. It is weird. It's not what we were led to believe Donald Trump thought was wise policy. But so what? This is Donald Trump we're talking about. It's not like you should be holding out for wise policy. That's not going to happen. But we have come to expect consistently unwise policy from him. So there is that. Although I suppose the chaos theory people could have said, well, what makes the least sense? What would cause the most chaos? What would be the most head-slappingest, totally inexplicable direction for Trump to take on Iran? I would put that question to you. If I put that question to you a week ago, you would likely say the dumbest, the absolutely least, the one that leaves us with the least ability to explain what's going on, and not be able to make heads or tails of it. Because, he drops nuclear weapons on Iran, except that would be, do you believe Trump would think that was a good idea? Yeah, most people would say, I could see Trump coming around to that decision. It's totally illogical and highly dangerous. Sure, he could come out. Yes, but I'm saying if you're analyzing Trump and you're just trying to figure out what are the outer limits of Trump's idiocy, what would be the policy he could adopt that would make everybody say, what? How does that make any sense? Clearly there, the answer is for him to say, what I'm going to do is sign on to a policy of endorsing the substance of the Obama-Iran nuclear deal. You might say, but without saying as much, or I'm going to rename it like he did like with NAFTA or something like that. Those details aside, that would be, that would make people say, first they would say, well, there's no way he's going to do that because it doesn't make any sense at all because he's totally dedicated to opposition to the deal. Ah, yes. That's why it does make sense as the worst possible, most head-slappingest out of the box possibility, right? And I guess if chaos is the aim, then a 180-degree reversal, but, I'm possibly adding additional layers to the chaos, insisting that it isn't what it appears to be. I guess the most head-slappingest approach to it is for him to say, I've always loved the Obama-era nuclear deal. I campaigned on my support for it. Then people would say, now I really don't know what's going on. So let's see. It may just be, hell, this could be Macron pitches him on something. He clearly thinks, he basically thinks everybody else is a great leader. He thinks he's as great as they are, but I don't know. So it may just be, I don't recognize the elements of the Obama era deal on their face when they are presented to me because I didn't know anything about it. I opposed it because Obama did it, and also the other party was Iran, and I don't like either of them. I don't have a favorable reaction when you mention either name, so therefore I hate the deal. What's in it? I don't know. But if you change the name of it to the Macron, or better yet, not the Macron-Trump plan, but the Trump-Macron plan, I love it. If it's what you say, I love it. Is that what's going on? All right, I guess I better read at this point. Trump has in recent weeks shown openness to entertaining President Emmanuel Macron's plan, according to 4 sources with knowledge of Trump's conversations with the French leader. Of course, the sources could be idiots, too. 2 of those sources said that State Department officials, including Secretary Mike Pompeo, are also open to weighing the French proposal. And I guess at this point you could say it's only openness to weighing it. Maybe that was just something they said to get dessert at the G7 dinner. Well, I'll give you 2 scoops if you're open to weighing it. Fine, I'm open. Give me the ice cream and then go home and say, I don't care about that. All right. They're open to weighing the French proposal in which the Paris government, that would be the one in France, would effectively ease the economic sanctions regime the Trump administration has applied on Tehran for more than a year. How would the French government... Oh, I see. They wouldn't ease our policy. They would counteract our policy with loan guarantees. And we're okay with that because dessert, I guess. The deal put forward by France, I think I might be right about that. Everyone's going to laugh and they're not going to publish it. But I think in a year we'll find out in a tell-all book that it was the dessert. I'm pretty good at picking these things out, which is to say, I don't know. Maybe I'm not good at it, but it will be years before you figure out whether I'm correct or not. I'm going to play on that. The deal put forward by France would compensate Iran for oil sales disrupted by American sanctions. Didn't we're spending money willy-nilly. Didn't we just read the other week that we were bribing ship captains with millions of dollars to pull your Iranian oil ship into port over here instead of going to Syria because we're so serious about these sanctions? I guess, again, the dumbest possible thing is the most likely, so I should just roll with it here. A large portion of Iran's economy relies on cash from oil sales. Most of that money is frozen in bank accounts across the globe. The $15 billion credit line would be guaranteed by Iranian oil. In exchange for the cash, this is starting to take shape here, oil. The $15 billion credit line would be guaranteed by Iranian oil. In exchange for the cash, Iran would have to come back into compliance with the nuclear accord it signed with the world's major powers in 2015. Tehran would also have to agree not to threaten the security of the Persian Gulf or to impede maritime navigation in the area, which they wouldn't if the sale of the oil was what was guaranteeing the line of credit, right? Lastly, Tehran would have to commit to regional Middle East talks in the future. All right. While Trump has been skeptical of helping Iran without preconditions in public, the president has at least hinted at an openness to considering Macron's pitch for placating the Iranian government, a move intended to help bring the Iranians to the negotiating table and to rescue the nuclear agreement that Trump and his former National Security Advisor John Bolton worked so hard to torpedo. But now Bolton's gone, right? At the G7 meeting last month, Trump told reporters that Iran might need a short-term letter of credit or a loan that could get them over a very rough patch. Trump told reporters that, eh? I missed that entirely. Iranian Prime Minister Javad Zarif made a surprise appearance at that meeting. To Robert Malley, who worked on Iran policy during the Obama administration, that visit indicated that Trump must have signaled openness to Macron's idea. Otherwise, Zarif would not have flown to France at the last minute. And, of course, it was the same city in France whose pronunciation I'm unsure of, so I'm skipping over it. But you know where it was. That place. Clearly, Trump responded to Macron in a way that gave the French president a reason to invite Zarif and Zarif a reason to come. Makes some sense. I guess. But it's counter to the reporting at the time where Trump was so miffed at this. I don't know. The French proposal would require the Trump administration to issue waivers on Iranian sanctions. That would be a major departure from the Trump administration's so-called maximum pressure campaign to exact financial punishments on the regime in Tehran. Easier to do without Bolton there, right? Ironically, during his time in office, President Barack Obama followed a not dissimilar approach to bring the Iranians to the negotiating table, throttling Iran's economy with sanctions before pledging relief for talks. The negotiations resulted in the Iran nuke deal that President Trump called rotten and pulled the U.S. out of during his first term, which we're still in, by the way. Trump's flirtations with, if not outright enthusiasm toward, okay, ready for that one? Enthusiasms. Right, if not outright enthusiasm toward chummily sitting down with foreign dictators and America's geopolitical foes are largely driven by his desire for historic photo ops and to be seen as the deal-maker in chief. It's a desire so strong that it can motivate him to upturn years of his own administration's policymaking and messaging. I guess so. And while President Trump has not agreed to anything yet, and we should be cautious about that, and he may just turn around and say no, he did signal a willingness to cooperate on such a proposal at various times throughout the last month, including at the G7. Is this not just the same thing over and over again? According to 4 sources with knowledge of the president's conversations about the deal. Is no one editing this? Am I wrong about how to edit things? Several sources told the Daily Beast that foreign officials are expecting Trump to either agree to cooperate on the French deal or to offer to ease some sanctions on Tehran. I would think he would rather take the lead, but who knows? Meanwhile, President Trump is also considering meeting Iranian President Hassan Rouhani on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in September. I do believe they'd like to make a deal Oh, this is Trump. I do believe they'd like to make a deal. If they do, that's great. And if they don't, that's great too. He does this all the time. We'll see what happens. Trump, he didn't say that yet. Oh, it's down here. I knew it. There's no way you could go into this discussion without doing the we'll see what happens. So here it is. I do believe they'd like to make a deal. If they do, that's great. And if they don't, that's great too. Everything's great, Trump told reporters Wednesday. But they have tremendous financial difficulty, and the sanctions are getting tougher and tougher. When asked if he would ease sanctions against Iran in order to get a meeting with Iran, Trump simply said, "We'll see what happens. I think Iran has a tremendous, tremendous potential," which is to say, he didn't say anything about it at all. He doesn't have any idea what to say about them. Spokespeople for the State Department, White House, and Treasury did not provide comment for this story. A spokesperson for the National Security Council, which is empty now, simply referred the Daily Beast to Trump's Wednesday comments on Iran. Bolton didn't comment on Wednesday either because he's fired. Trump's willingness to discuss the credit line with the French, Iranians, and also Japanese President Shinzo Abe. Did we not? Abe Shinzo, right? Okay, whatever. Damn it. Get this right. Well, this all frustrated Bolton, who had for months urged Trump not to soften his hard line against the regime in Tehran. Bolton, who vociferously opposed the Macron proposal, departed the Trump administration on explicitly and mutually bad terms on Tuesday. On Bolton's way out of the door, Trump and senior administration officials went out of their way to keep publicly insisting he was fired, as Bolton kept messaging various news outlets that Trump couldn't fire him because he quit. The former national security advisor and lifelong hawk had ruffled so many feathers and made so many enemies in the building that his senior colleagues had repeatedly tried to snitch him out to Trump for allegedly leaking to the media. On Tuesday afternoon, Bolton messaged the Daily Beast to say that allegations about him being a leaker were flatly incorrect. He leaked that he wasn't the leaker. At a press briefing held shortly after Bolton's exit on Tuesday, neither Secretary of State Mike Pompeo nor Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin showed much sympathy for Bolton's falling star in Trump world. There were many times Ambassador Bolton and I disagreed, Pompeo told reporters. That's to be sure, but that's true with a lot of people with whom I interact. A lot of people disagree with me. All right. It's funny. According to those who know Pompeo well, the secretary's public statement was a glaring understatement. By the end, he viewed Bolton as an arsonist, hell-bent on setting fire to anyone's agenda that didn't align with his own, including the president's, said a source close to Pompeo who's discussed Bolton with the secretary in recent weeks. Pompeo believes him to be among the most self-centered people he's ever worked with. Wow. A talented guy, no doubt, but not someone who was willing to subordinate his ego to the president's foreign policy agenda. Similar to Mike Flynn in many ways. And, of course, the ego, similar to Donald Trump. Team of ego rivals, I guess, right? Whether or not the president follows through with supporting Macron is unclear, as Trump is known to consider or temporarily back high-profile domestic or foreign policy initiatives, only to quickly backtrack or about face. Yes, that is true. That could lead us to discussion of the supposed plan to, I guess, roust the homeless in L.A. and greater California, which may or may not be a real thing. It's offensive. Yes, it's the kind of thing that Trump would consider despite the fact that he's got no legal basis for it. It's even the kind of thing that he could charge ahead with regardless, because there has to be a Brian Beutler reference in here at some point, right? As Brian put it this morning, if I can scroll back fast enough, a good plan. Have I jumped ahead in all of this? I have, really. You've all heard about this. There's like two thoughts that this article gave me. This one, and I'm trying to scroll back and find the other one because I managed to skate right past it without launching into a discussion of it. But that was a mistake because now I've lost that thread. But let me see if I can open that up and take a look back through the article and see if I can find it again. Anyway, I guess we'll make the homeless roundup the next issue here. In case you missed the story, the Washington Post reported yesterday. Here, I'll just open it up. Trump officials tour unused FAA facility in California in search for a place to relocate homeless people. This is just flat out, here's the story. Jeff Stein, Josh Dawsey, Tracy Jan, she maybe says Yan, I'm not certain. A team of Trump administration officials toured a California facility once used by the Federal Aviation Administration this week as they searched for a potential site to relocate homeless people, according to 3 government officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the private tour. All right, maybe the way to handle it is this. That's the flat assertion. One topic for discussion is, should you ever credit a flat assertion on something that stupid by the Trump administration? I think the answer is no. This is the sort of thing, this is why I carry this over from the Tehran or the Iran story, is that the Iran story ends with the warning, how do they put it? Trump is known to consider or temporarily back high-profile domestic or foreign policy initiatives only to quickly backtrack or about face. So this could be one of those things. This idea that I think what happens here is Trump hates California, but he's about to go there apparently. He hates a lot of things. California is one of them. They didn't vote for him. He thinks it's a hellhole and it's full of socialists, and it's a great way of illustrating all the things that's wrong with things he doesn't like, which he calls socialism. And one of them is having homeless people, even though there are homeless people everywhere, and it has very little to do with anything. And probably the more socialism you got, the less homeless you're likely to have. But of course, Republicans believe the opposite, et cetera, et cetera. But okay. So he's got to make, I don't know why he's making a visit to California, but it says in the story that he is, and it may just be a matter of, well, when I go there, I don't want to see all of those disgusting homeless people around. So round them up. Or it may be policy, or it may be a thing, a policy like, this is how I want to deal with the problem of homelessness. I'm going to round them up. And then they'll have homes. The homes will be jail, but a home. And I don't know whether he thinks that's clean streets at any cost, or whether he thinks if I do this thing and I do it in California, and even if it backfires or goes very poorly and people are dying in these things, and he can point to California and say, see, I told you it was a hell. I made it one. But, is that any more nonsensical than the Iran policy flip-flop, or maybe flip-flop? No, it's not. So you can do anything when you're Trump. Anything. Doesn't matter. All right. So the story continues. President Trump has directed aides to launch a major crackdown. That's not in quotes or anything, but you know how he uses the word major. A major crackdown on homelessness in California. Now, a major crackdown on homelessness anywhere is the sort of thing that makes you say, what does that mean? A major crackdown. For Trump, a major crackdown on homelessness means I would like to hit homeless people over the head with baseball bats, a major crackdown on them. Whereas if it was President Obama, you might imagine, well, a major crackdown on homelessness is a much more aggressive program of aiding states for dealing with their homeless situation by, let's say, possibly increasing assistance to states that are trying to find the way to get people into permanent housing, or at least decent shelters, and help them with job skills, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas Trump is, I want to beat up homeless people and tell them to get out of here and go hide somewhere, go jump in a lake or something. I don't care whether you eventually recover from the condition of homelessness. I just want you out of here. I want to be able to sell property here. I just don't want to see you from my limo. I don't know what that means. It's linked. So, I guess I'm curious, what does it mean, major crackdown? It's linked to another Washington Post story from just the day before. Trump pushing for a major crackdown on homeless camps in California. That is to say, so I guess, again, sending cops to bust into tent cities and beat people up or arrest them so that they, at the very least, they stay homeless, but they stay homeless in separate areas as opposed to concentrating in one area. So I don't know. Okay, back to the article. So Trump has directed aides to launch this major crackdown, spurring an effort across multiple government agencies to determine how to deal with sprawling tent camps on the streets of Los Angeles and other cities, officials said. Trump is expected to visit California on Tuesday and Wednesday. One administration official with knowledge of Trump's visit to California said there were discussions about an announcement related to California's growing homeless problem next week, but a second official said that any decision could be premature and that it was not on the current schedule for the trip. So I don't know what the purported reason for the trip is. And it's not clear that it's anything other than to criticize California for having homeless people and then maybe announcing this thing. Whatever other reason they come up with may, in fact, just end up being cover. I don't know. I haven't heard any discussion of this trip or why they're having it. Trump has asked aides to figure out, quote, how the hell we can get these people off the streets, one senior administration official said. The FAA facility toured by the administration officials is located in or near Los Angeles, but its precise name or whereabouts, or whether it is a current or former government facility, were not immediately known. So once again, maybe there is no facility. Maybe there's no plan. Maybe it's just Trump saying, I hate it when homeless people are all over the streets. Get these people the hell off the streets. How can we do that? And it's not a plan per se. It's a thing that Donald Trump exclaimed. And then he said, I'm president. You should find a way to do the thing. And I mean, by what authority would federal officials be doing any of this? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's Trump wants it done, and he doesn't care that there's no federal role in any of this. And, you could backfill a federal role. Well, the federal government will donate disused federal property to the city or state with the stipulation that it be used for homeless assistance. And, I don't know. I guess that's the name that they would put on it, because it'd be very unlikely that he would say, what I want done with this facility is this is the place I want you to beat the homeless people up. Bring them here and beat them up here because there's no cameras there. Maybe that's what he wants to do. I don't know. But it's not clear. Like, what, if federal officials are just going to roam the streets, rousting homeless people and saying, by the authority of the federal government, I place you under arrest for the crime of, the local crime of what? Loitering, vagrancy, what? I don't know. Anyway, it also remains unclear how the federal government could accomplish getting homeless people off the streets of Los Angeles, or what legal authority officials would use to do so. This had lots of commentators on Twitter yesterday grousing about this. I think NYC Southpaw saying, how do you get to the 6th paragraph before mentioning that there's no federal authority for this whatsoever? Who cares? And that's where, I guess at this point, we bring in the Brian Beutler reaction to it, which is essentially, he's reacting to Josh Marshall's tweet. Josh Marshall saying, I doubt they'll find any legal basis for doing so, but it sounds like Trump is pushing to create some sort of internment camps for homeless people in California. It does sound like that. And Brian's response to it is, well, here's what you do. 1, forge ahead anyhow, right? 2, appeal injunctions. When people go to court and say, you don't have any federal authority to send people to arrest homeless people and round them up into FAA facilities as an internment camp. I know. We don't. We'll prove it in court. Fine, go ahead and do it. All right. The court says, yep, it's open and shut. You're enjoined from doing so. And you say, I'm going to appeal that. And pending appeal, we'd like to be able to go ahead with our program. The courts may or may not say yes, but they just go ahead anyway. So there you go. You forge ahead anyhow, appeal the injunctions, win a stay of the injunctions in the Supreme Court, which you've stacked with your own partisans, of course, as we all know. 4th, you order feds to intern homeless people anyway. Then number 5 of the plan, lose in court on the merits. And then number 6, You say, well, I guess we lost and we're going to have to release all the homeless people we rounded up. And 6, release homeless people wherever the libs would be most owned. Or at least threatened to do so. Or, I guess, like with internment camps for migrant children, say, yeah, I guess we're going to have to release them after all. Maybe we'll release them where we'll be able to most own the libs, but then maybe not do it anyway. So that could be posing some difficulties, and it's probably par for the course. I don't know what to make of this thing. It may all just be, a Trump brain fart, as Southpaw said. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Wow, still lots of other things to cover here, and I don't know, maybe I ought to continue with this story just to see if there's anything else we can squeeze out of it. Let's see. The Washington Post reported Tuesday that the administration is considering raising tent camps, creating new temporary facilities, or refurbishing government facilities as part of Trump's directive on homelessness. The changes would attempt to give the federal government a larger role in supervising housing and health care for residents, because small government. Some administration officials expressed skepticism that the federal government wanted to get into the business of operating a large homeless shelter in Los Angeles, but there were also questions about the feasibility of turning the FAA facility into a shelter and how it could be legally done. One administration official with knowledge of Trump's visit to California said there were discussions about a homelessness announcement next week. Senior administration officials said that forcing people into new facilities was not under consideration, with one official telling the Washington Post, "We're not rounding people up or anything yet." They actually say yet. "You guys in the media get too ahead of yourselves." Or they're learning how to read Trumpster statements. The administration delegation that visited the FAA site included members of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and the Justice Department. Remember, the Department of Veterans Affairs was there because there's no such thing as a homeless veteran, right? Los Angeles officials were blindsided by news of the sweeping plans being considered by the administration for the city's homeless population. Some had thought White House officials were arriving this week to simply learn more about the issues. The administration's delegation divulged little information to city officials about what they were doing in Los Angeles when they were not with city representatives. "They were very cagey with us about what they were doing," said a Los Angeles city official who spoke on a condition of anonymity to be candid. "Our only understanding from them coming into this was they wanted to poke around and learn more about what we were doing out here. All this stuff about cracking down and sweeping people out of Skid Row was a total surprise to us." The Trump administration team also met for an open-ended discussion about homelessness with the Los Angeles Police Union, according to an official with direct knowledge of the meeting, which was first reported by the Los Angeles Times. At that meeting Tuesday, administration officials asked how or if the federal government could help local authorities take homeless people off the streets of Los Angeles and into a sanitary place where they could access services including showers and meals. They also talked about a recent sweep made of the Tenderloin district in San Francisco, where there is a significant homeless population, the official said. Administration officials also asked about the Skid Row section of Los Angeles, where homelessness has recently skyrocketed. City officials gave a tour of the Jordan Downs housing project in Los Angeles on Tuesday to a team that included federal officials from Veterans Affairs, the EPA, the Domestic Policy Council, the Justice Department, and HUD, according to Branimir Kvartuch, spokesman for City Council member Joe Buscaino, a Democrat. About 6 city staffers and 6 federal officials were on that tour. The administration team also visited Los Angeles Emergency Response Center for Homelessness, a nonprofit housing developer, and a homeless shelter in southern Los Angeles, according to the news release from Mayor Eric Garcetti. Okay, so some indication that they were following a more traditional path, these federal officials, in the meetings and they were taking and tours that they were taking. That is to say, that would indicate that the idea is, can we open and operate a large-scale shelter of a traditional type, as opposed to an internment camp? But I mean, coupled with how the hell can we get these people off the streets? And talking to the Los Angeles Police Union, like, don't worry, we got your back. We'll cover you. We'll pardon anybody that's convicted for hitting people over the head too hard or whatever it is. Maybe that's what's going on. It's hard to believe that Donald Trump is taking the approach to homelessness that, well, we should mobilize all the resources of the federal government to create a safe and healthy environment into which homeless people can be moved to help put them back on their feet. That doesn't feel like a Donald Trump plan. You know what I mean? All right. So, maybe we're getting too excited about this. Maybe not. I don't know. It's difficult to tell. We'll see what happens. Like everything else, we have to see whether this is a real thing, whether he forgets about it by Tuesday of next week, or whether he goes and makes a big speech about how it's, how many times has he given us the big speech about how fantastically the wall is going, and the wall's not being built, which is fine by me. Just, happens to be true. Because is this going to be another example of the exact same thing or what? Okay. We now have to turn our attention, I think, to what's happening in breaking news. As Kate Sherrill tells us, breaking impeachment investigation news. She sends me the tweet of Andrew Desiderio, who says, breaking, that's how we know it's breaking, House Judiciary Committee approves resolution, we knew this was going to happen, right, spelling out the parameters for its impeachment investigation into President Trump. All Democrats voted aye, all Republicans voted no. So, all right, that makes some sense, probably what we would have expected for the vote outcome. And we were warned earlier in the week that this vote was coming. Let's see what Andrew has to say in his Politico piece on it. House Judiciary Committee approves guidelines for Trump impeachment probe. Yes. All right. Well, they approved the parameters for the impeachment investigation. The most significant step Democrats have taken yet as they weigh the divisive move. I don't know if it really is all that divisive, but people love to say it is. The party line vote comes as House Democrats have struggled to articulate a unified message on impeachment, with senior party leaders avoiding the term even, while the Judiciary Committee embraces it in court filings. Some call this process an impeachment inquiry. Some call it an impeachment investigation. Nadler said, arguing that a House vote is not necessary. That's true. There is no legal difference between these terms, and I no longer care to argue about the nomenclature. So, it doesn't make any sense to me would you really have a pitched battle over whether it's an inquiry or an investigation? I hope not. I hope no one was really doing that. The resolution, which Nadler billed as a necessary next step in its months-long investigation, allows Trump and his lawyers to formally respond to evidence and testimony presented in the committee's hearings. The measure also preemptively triggers a House rule that allows staffers to question witnesses for an hour at the end of every hearing, deemed part of the impeachment investigation. It describes the panel's ability to accept evidence in secret executive sessions, and it authorizes the subcommittees to hold hearings and question witnesses in order to expedite the process. Republicans ripped the measure as a meaningless gesture, which they voted against unanimously, because that's how meaningless it was, that simply points to procedures already available in the House and committee's rules. Nadler has said the resolution is an important step to acknowledge the panel's investigation and to deploy the procedural mechanisms in advance of impeachment-related hearings. Doug Collins, the top Republican on the committee, said Dems were trying to make it appear they were toughening their stance on impeachment. They should be happy that they're not, if that's what they believe. He makes a bizarre comment. The Judiciary Committee has become a giant Instagram filter to make it appear that something's happening that it's not. He wants the appearance of something that it is not. Okay? Collins said of Nadler. In late July, the committee for the first time referred to its investigation as an impeachment probe, telling federal courts that the panel is considering whether to recommend articles of impeachment to the full House. It was part of an effort to secure documents and witness testimony that Dems say are critical for the investigation and remain tied up in court amid blockades from the White House and Justice Department. But when lawmakers returned to Washington this week after a 6-week recess, Dems couldn't seem to agree on what to call their investigation, a reflection of the competing political priorities inside the Democratic caucus. Progressives have been clamoring for a more aggressive posture on impeachment. Moderate Dems, many of whom represent Republican-leaning districts and are considered vulnerable in the next election, are reluctant to embrace the impeachment moniker. Representative Tom McClintock, Republican of California, said Dems were trying to have your impeachment and deny it too. Republicans also noted Dems do not have enough support among their caucus for a vote on the House floor to authorize an impeachment inquiry, although I think they actually do. The committee kicked off its investigation into the president in March. Background here. Mueller still remains at the center of all this, although it really shouldn't, or it shouldn't be necessary anyway. Back down here to Nadler said the committee will decide by the end of the year whether to recommend articles of impeachment to the full House. They'll probably back off of that. Some articles have already been referred to the Judiciary Committee, but that's an automatic thing. We have a constitutional, historical, and moral obligation to fully investigate these matters. Let's take the next step in that work without delay. So, okay, not earth-shaking, but important in tracking what's going on. Let me see what else I have here. Put away in pocket. We may need to change directions entirely, or what else? What are the things we need to scoop up, if anything? Okay. A small-ish. Well, I don't know. It depends on where you're coming from here. A new development in Sharpie Gate, I guess, for lack of a better term for this thing. New York Times reporting what everybody, I think, with a decent head on their shoulders, already had guessed for themselves. But this is the value of reporting, is you get information out there to back up the surmise. Headline, Trump pressed top aide to have weather service clarify, quote unquote, clarify, forecast that contradicted Trump. In other words, here is the reporting that says, yes, it was Donald Trump who said to somebody, listen, I need you to go beat the crap out of people in NOAA. I need a statement that looks like it comes out of NOAA that says the president was right after all. Long story short for the whole thing about the NOAA statement, in case I haven't made my position clear on the show, I think I've been very clear on Twitter about it. The so-called NOAA statement, the unsigned statement that came out, at the end of last week, and then we debated over the weekend. My position on this is that this is not a NOAA statement. I think this is better viewed as a forgery, not in the literal sense that, since there was no signature put to it, they weren't forging a signature or anything. What I'm saying is this isn't a NOAA statement. NOAA statements come from scientists, and they're endorsed by scientists, and I don't know whether they're generally signed or whatever or come under his name. But what happened here was the president ordered someone to say what he wanted said and put it on NOAA letterhead and call it a NOAA statement and say, see, NOAA backs me. But no one working at NOAA who has the right to speak from a scientific perspective about the weather agrees with the president. The people who, quote unquote, agree with the president, and it is not clear that they do, they were simply following orders, that won't help you in trial, but they were simply following orders from the president, being handed down by various intermediaries. Put this statement on paper. Make sure the paper has NOAA letterhead on it, and tell everybody it's a NOAA statement. It is not. It is not a NOAA statement. The president is using the power that purportedly accrues to him from purportedly having won the Electoral College vote to use his the unitary executive theory to say, look, if you don't put this out the way I describe it, you're fired. It is not a NOAA statement, but I'm going to tell everyone it is a NOAA statement, and I'm going to point to the letterhead on top. And knowing how things go with the press here, the press will say it's a NOAA statement. It comes on letterhead. This is about the training that we all have, press and otherwise. It does not mean that you're a bad reporter if you, quote unquote, fall for this. If someone hands you a piece of paper that purports to be NOAA letterhead and it has this statement on it, you'd say it's a NOAA statement. You might note that it's unattributed, but you'll believe it's a NOAA statement. I'm telling you, think different, to borrow the Apple slogan from years ago. This isn't a NOAA statement. NOAA statements are made by scientists. They filter up and they come out of a press office, to be sure. And this also came out of a press office. But the press office isn't empowered to issue its own statements. They have to come with some backing. And in NOAA, that means the backing of scientists who know what they're talking about. The analogy I used on Twitter a couple of days ago, which means it's going to be too far back to scroll back and find, but I can recreate it for you, is this. Suppose the Supreme Court has a press office. You don't have to suppose that. I'm changing my mind. Forget the suppose. They do have a press office. But suppose that press office, of its own volition, or under orders from President Trump, directly or indirectly, puts out a statement on Supreme Court letterhead that says the Supreme Court has decided to negate the, I don't remember which amendment it is, but the constitutional provision prohibiting more than 2 terms for a president. Trump constantly flirts with this. He loves to say he's making jokes, tweeting around people's signs like Trump 2024. He constantly jokes about, he says, running for a 3rd term. And lots of people are concerned that this is not a joke. But of course, everybody thinks it must be a joke because clearly the Constitution says, the amendment to the Constitution says you can't have more than 2 terms. So come on. We're definitely not going to have that, right? And we've been through the explanation whereby we say, to hell with everything. Everything you know about the Constitution and the way the country works is wrong if you think you've got a Supreme Court majority to say the opposite, even without a good reason, right? So there's that function of it. But let's focus on the press shop here for a second. So if the press office of the Supreme Court puts out on Supreme Court letterhead under somebody's orders, right, that the Supreme Court has decided that it will negate that constitutional provision, and Trump is in fact eligible to run for and serve out a 3rd term or 4th term or 5th term in office, right? What would you do with that? The first thing you would say is, oh my God, that's crazy. The second thing you would say is, how did that get decided? Where's the opinion? You would turn at that point to say, which Supreme Court justice said what and who voted how? That's what I need to know about this thing. Well, that is what you need to know about the NOAA statement, but it was not provided to you. Now, suppose the press office and the White House both then insisted to you, look, I'm not going to get into specifics. The point is the Supreme Court said this. You can tell that the Supreme Court said this by looking at the goddamn letterhead. It says Supreme Court of the United States. Well, people would rightly say, no, that's not how this stuff works. The only people who have the right to speak for the court are the justices, and they frequently do speak. Where are they? Where's the opinion? Why am I not seeing this? The press office doesn't say what goes for the Supreme Court. Aha, that's right. They don't. Now, the press and the White House press operation may very well, at this point, in this hypothetical scenario, say, yes, they do. And everyone would write down, Yes, they do. And then they would say it's alleged that they do, but it's highly controversial and, opinions differ. We'll have to leave it there. That's another story by itself. But I think the inclination among today's press, without any training or prompting, would be for them to say, because they've come to expect written opinions from the Supreme Court, that no, this is not a Supreme Court opinion. This is bizarre. Where did this come from? I must know who wrote this. It's clear that the Supreme Court justices didn't say this. We didn't see it argued. It's not on the docket. They haven't issued an opinion. And although sometimes they can do unpublished opinions about things, it's generally not negating. And how would you even get to negating a constitutional amendment? You can't do it on the basis of its unconstitutionality. It's in the Constitution. It doesn't work. Well, who cares? We got the 5 votes we needed. It doesn't make any sense. But neither does saying, fine, George W. Bush is the president, and it's because reasons, and because we just said it was because reasons, and we recognize that that's terrible and stupid thing to say and insupportable and senseless and meaningless, you're never allowed to cite this again for any reason. And then, of course, people began immediately citing it for various reasons, and the court said, well, I guess it's being cited. So, all right. So, I mean, it's a nutty situation, right? But that's how crazy I find the NOAA thing. The press office says this. Well, NOAA's full of scientists. And as far as I can tell, all the scientists are saying they don't support this. This is outrageous. Yeah. Well, then who put their name to this? Look over there. It's the good rich blimp. I don't know what they're telling people in the press. They're telling them nothing. And yet the press continues to say, yeah, the NOAA statement. It wasn't a NOAA statement. It was a press secretary who was told, as according to the news story, first we found out on Monday, Wilbur Ross told the press secretary that he had to do it. Well, did anybody tell Wilbur Ross that he had to tell somebody that? I don't know. Anyway, this New York Times piece lays it out. President Trump, seeking to justify his claim of a hurricane threat to Alabama, pressed aides to intervene with a federal scientific agency, leading to a highly unusual public rebuke of the forecasters who contradicted him, according to people familiar with the events. Okay, before we get to the... No. I'll make the main point. In response to the president's request, Mick Mulvaney, the acting White House chief of staff, told Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, to have the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, publicly correct the forecasters who had insisted that Alabama was not actually at risk from Hurricane Dorian. So that's the answer to the question. Trump told Mulvaney. Mulvaney told Ross. Ross told somebody at NOAA, and the statement was issued. Now, insert my argument. Okay, what does this mean? This means it was a White House statement put on NOAA letterhead. Why? Because they thought that would make a big difference with the reporters. Well, if NOAA changes its mind, that's, and backs up the president, the president will be able to point to that and say, see, genius scientists even acknowledge that I'm right. Whereas if the White House simply says, nope, we're right, the press says, that's the White House backing itself up. That doesn't mean anything. So they leverage the power of the presidency here for the most petty of reasons, but also the most corrupt of reasons. I'm going to masquerade as NOAA. I'm the president. If I say it, they won't believe it because it's me backing myself up. I need scientists to say it, but scientists won't say it. So therefore, I will take scientists' stationery and say it for them. But I won't write their name at the bottom because that's real forgery. I'll just say, NOAA says this. And that's just as bad. You're escaping, they're hoping to escape on the technicality. I'm not going to be charged with forgery because I didn't fake anybody's name. But you faked the whole thing. That's not from NOAA. Okay, so back to the first paragraph here. President Trump, seeking to justify his claims, pressed aides to intervene with a federal scientific agency, leading to a highly unusual public rebuke of the forecasters who contradicted him, according to people familiar with the events. All right, this is Peter Baker, Lisa Friedman, Christopher Flavel on the story. here, ready for the nitpick on the language. It's not a highly unusual public rebuke of the forecasters. It's a highly typical public rebuke of the forecasters. Trump does nothing but issue public rebukes of people who disagree with him. What is unusual, or what would be unusual, is if the actual NOAA heads, the real scientific heads, chiefs of personnel there at NOAA, who are actual scientists and not political appointees installed in the press office there and elsewhere, I guess at the very, very top, the political leadership of NOAA. What would be unusual is if those scientists issued a public rebuke. But they didn't. What happened was a highly typical public rebuke from the president was issued on hijacked stationery to make it look like scientists rebuked other scientists on behalf of and backing up the president. That is not what happened. That is very difficult to convey in layman's terms, I guess, and make your word count, but it's a more accurate portrayal of what happened. It wasn't highly unusual. Trump does it every day. What was unusual was that he was pretending to speak for someone else. He was using a ventriloquist dummy, pretending that he had a NOAA scientist on his lap saying, this is a public rebuke of the forecasters who contradicted the beautiful, wonderful, fantastic, talented president, Donald Trump, your favorite president of all time. Oops, I've used the voice. I've let people know. So, okay, the news part of it is supposed to be that Mick Mulvaney told Wilbur Ross, who told somebody. Okay? The senior administration official, who asked not to be identified discussing internal matters, said Trump told his staff to have NOAA, quote, clarify the forecaster's position, which they didn't. NOAA, which is part of the Commerce Department, then issued an unsigned statement saying the Birmingham, Alabama office of the National Weather Service was wrong to refute the president's warning so categorically, but the statement only intensified uproar over Mr. Trump's storm prediction as critics accused his administration, of politicizing the weather, which is essentially what they did. The Commerce Department Inspector General has opened an investigation, and on Wednesday, a Democrat-controlled House Science Committee kicked off its own inquiry, which, again, politicizes the whole thing. The actual House Science Committee is what it is. The fact that Democrats are the majority on it, well, that's a happy accident, and they wouldn't have opened the inquiry if they weren't. This is true. But, just get to the point, or leave it at the point and say that an official body is conducting an inquiry. As a result, the furor over Mr. Trump's storm prediction has evolved from a momentary embarrassment into a sustained political liability for the administration, no longer just a question of a president unwilling to admit a mistake, but now a White House seemingly willing to pressure scientists to validate it. That's true. That's one of the overriding issues in the story, but I felt it was important to make this distinction. I really hold out no hope whatsoever of being able to convince the mainstream traditional news media to view things this way, but I actually think it's super important. I think it's one of the things we're going to have to deal with post-Trump administration. That's going to be very difficult, differentiating between the personnel who can speak and those who can't, and the actual policy going forward in this thing. By the way, speaking of policy going forward, we have another situation developing in the Democratic committees, which I noticed yesterday, in which I don't remember even which department this was, but I saw videos being circulated by Oliver Willis, as a matter of fact, of a committee hearing in which I guess the subject was what? The deportation of people who were ill, migrants and immigrants who were ill and in the United States seeking emergency medical treatment, being deported, and of course, basically, I guess, being sentenced to death in so doing. And they were trying to get to the bottom of where did this policy come from, who ordered it, and the officials who had been brought in from the agency, citing ongoing litigation, refused to answer the question even of what is current policy? Or where did this policy come from? And who told you that this was policy? And they refuse to answer the question, which should immediately, in my book, but in no one else's, I guess, inside Congress, lead to contempt charges, and inherent contempt charges at that, because how do you even do oversight if you can't get officials to say what policy is? Or why are you doing what you're doing? Who told you to do it? If I can't get an answer to that, I have to assume you're making it up. You must be the guilty party. Or you're covering for someone else who is, and either way, you're the party in front of me, you're the one going to jail until you answer this question. But of course, we don't do that, and we just ended up with a lot of frustrated committee members circulating annoying video. We got nowhere.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, I hope that made some sense to you. If it didn't, you can always stay tuned for Justice Putnam in the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. He'll make sense for you. Samantha Power, for instance, explained how Russia took such a dark turn under Putin in the aftermath of the Cold War that Vlad exceeded her worst expectations. I should like to hear something about that, and much more, of course, next.